please
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting. We're having a few little minor technical difficulties with Councilor Broyles set up here, but I believe we could still continue to move forward while it's been working on. Ms. Martinez, we're going to have a roll call. So do you want to go ahead and just do a verbal roll call?
Yeah, I can do a verbal roll call. Counselor Hensley? Here. Counselor Vigil?
Here.
Counselor Daniel? Present. Mayor Coleman?
Here?
Counselor Broyles?
Here.
Counselor Carson?
Here.
Counselor Grego?
Present.
All counselors present and a quorum has been declared.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. The next item we have is the agenda approval. Counselor Vigil?
Mayor, I move that we approve consent calendar A. I'm sorry, the agenda as presented. Sorry about that.
It's okay. No worries. Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, Ms. Martinez, can you still take a verbal vote on this, please?
Yes, sir. Counselor Carson?
Yes.
Counselor Broyles?
Yes.
Mayor Coleman?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Vigil?
Yes.
Counselor Hensley?
Yes.
Counselor Griego?
Yes.
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the next item on the agenda is citizen comment. Citizen comment is where we allow people who are here in person as well as Zoom participants to make comments. We do ask that you keep your comments to within 3 minutes. If you are still talking within 3 minutes, at the 3-minute mark, I will politely ask you to end your conversation at that time. So we're going to start off here with the audience first that we have in person, and then we'll go to the attendees who are attending by Zoom. So the first card I have is Chuck Kelly. You might want to turn the mic on. I don't see it turning. It's not red. Just push one of those buttons. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, council. I just wanted to speak in opposition of the new vacation rental law that you guys are considering. And I know that there's going to be a whole public hearing on that on the 1st. And I just wanted to plant the seeds. But as most of you know, I manage rental properties in this town. That's what I do. I manage over 300 long-term rentals for many different people. We also manage vacation rentals. In fact, we're the only professional vacation rental management agency in this town. And yet no one asked us for comment or got our opinion or came to us and said, hey, what do you think of this before it was being proposed? So I thought, well, I better give my opinions now. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about vacation rentals right now. There's a big attack, the entire, this side of the country. A lot of people are, trying to find a bad guy, and the bad guy right now is vacation rentals. And I don't think that's fair. It's not fair to the homeowner who they can't sell their house or they can't rent it out for enough to make the mortgage, so they have to do a vacation rental. It's not fair to the investor who says, I'm gonna turn, take my savings out of the stock market and buy a house and turn it into a vacation rental. And we're doing all this under the premise of affordable housing, but it actually doesn't affect affordable housing because most of the places we're talking about aren't ever going to be affordable houses. They're the very top of the market. So I think it's something we need to take a step back from And if we really want to make a difference with affordable housing, then let's raise the taxes and let's earmark that for affordable housing. Instead, what it feels like is to all the people who are just wanting to get into it or whatever, it feels like somebody made it, they got to the top of the mountain, and now they're pulling the ladder up from underneath them so that no one else can. And it feels very anti-American to say, hey, guess what? Basically, the city's full, we're not allowing anymore. And I'm happy to share more information. I'm happy to tell you that most of our vacation rentals aren't rented by tourists. They're actually rented by doctors and nurses and contractors who come here to work, to come here to provide medical support to our hospital, who, you know, they're always struggling with finding good doctors. That's who rent vacation rentals in this town. And it feels like they're under attack because we need more affordable housing. So they're going to be the bad guy for now. So I just urge you to do a little more research when you consider this, because I don't think you have the full picture, and I'm available to anyone who wants to reach out to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Great job. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Martinez, I don't have any other cards up here, so we'll go ahead and go to the attendees on Zoom. I do see one hand that is raised, but if you don't mind, could you give the Zoom attendees instructions on how to raise their hand?
Yes, sir. So if you want to speak for citizen comment, you're going to use the raise your hand button in the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9. So looks like I only see one hand raised.
Okay, if you could invite that person in.
Okay, Heather?
Hello, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Hi, so I am a host for an Airbnb locally in Alamosa on the south side of the city. And I do have to agree with what Chuck Kelly said. If we were to rent this home otherwise, with a large or long-term lease, the cost of renting the home would not be affordable to low-income individuals. We do rent the property part-time when my father is not in town, because he does out-of-town contracting, and it's beneficial not only to the neighborhood, because it keeps or distracts criminal activity from the that neighborhood. And I think that you guys should really go and kind of take a look at some of these short-term rentals to see what they are bringing to the neighborhood. I know in just our neighborhood alone, there's only a couple houses that are actually occupied by actual homeowners. The rest are occupied by people that don't even, like, squatters, basically. So I really think that you guys need to, like Chuck Kelly said, to take some time, do more research on this, maybe speak a little bit more to the people that are actually doing these short-term rentals and that have been doing them, and get some information from them, rather than just jumping to conclusions. We had a call in to one of the gentlemen that sent us the letter in the mail, and he started digging into other things that didn't even concern the short-term rental, and started making accusations that were unfair. So I think you really need to take a step back and speak to all of us and kind of see where we're coming from.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, looks like we may have another hand or two raised, Ms. Martinez.
Oh, we have one more raised. So it's Laura Bruno, I think. So you say her last name.
Hi, yes, my name's Laura Bruno. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I, really appreciate the other people who've spoken already in terms of wanting to hear their input, also to, do some research, find out what other towns our size are doing to address, issues with short-term rentals. And I guess I will have a different opinion than what's been mentioned, not since I don't own a short-term rental, but instead live across the street from one. And I live in a quiet residential neighborhood. And the amount of difficulty that this rental has brought to our neighborhood has been really, really huge, to the point where one of our neighbors is considering selling their home to get away from the short-term rental tenants who come in. I would say that overall, some of the renters are people who come in to do construction work, or maybe families who are traveling through, and, they're polite, they're respectful, but that's not the case all the time. And so I do think that when we think about people's rights and freedoms to be able to, do what they want to do with their property, I totally get that. But also I think that there needs to be some understanding for the impact on the neighborhood and for people who don't want to live on a hotel strip. And it got to the point where last summer, the people who own that property were actually using it as a venue hall and letting local people rent it out to have parties. And so that's really concerning to me, that people are able to just kind of do whatever they want to make money. And, it's the neighbors who are really suffering from that. So I am actually a big fan of the ordinances that are being proposed. And I would just really hope that the short-term rental owners consider the needs of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other new hands raised? Ms. Martinez?
I do not see any, Mayor.
Okay. Seeing that there are no other hands raised, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comment segment and bring it back to staff for any follow-up at this time.
Mayor, since all the comments were related to the agenda item that we'll be discussing later, I'll fold in any comments at that point in time.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And as a custom, usually at this time, we recognize any elected officials, and we would like to recognize County Commissioner Vern Hersink, who's in here tonight, and also former State Rep V. Hill, who's here. Thank you for your service. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on down to consent calendar A. Councilor V. Hill.
Mayor, I move that we approve consent calendar A.
I'll second. Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Any further comments? All right. Okay, if you could start voting, please. And I believe we're gonna have to recognize
And Councilor
Councilor
Griego?
Griego on Zoom whenever we're voting, okay?
Yes.
Perfect. The motion carried unanimously.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Council. Brings us up to regular business, presentation from the golf board, a golf board report.
Hello, council, staff. Thank you for having us tonight. We'll try to be brief, but my name's Eddie Valdez, and I am the current board president of the Golf Advisory Board. And we just wanted to share some of the things, some of the positives that have been happening at the golf course since we all joined together. It's been really great. I mean, there's a couple things that we talked about in our initial talks of joining forces, and we had members that were concerned that maybe it wasn't a great idea for the golf course. I'm happy to say that I think we, as a membership base, are really pleased to be under the control of under the operation of the city. The season opened March 1st this year, which is pretty standard. We're getting ready to close here in a couple of weeks. And it has been a pretty banner year for Cattails Golf Course. I know a lot of you had an opportunity to tour the course when we went through the flood. For those of you that haven't been out there, the course has rebounded amazingly, in large part to the irrigation system that was installed in the front nine. The water savings with that has been everything that we kind of hoped it would be, and maybe even a little bit more. Our staff out there has done an amazing job, whether it be the grounds crew or John and our pro shop staff, kind of changing the dynamic of the way we operated. One of the things that I liked was the tournament schedule. We were loaded with tournament play over the years, almost to the point of not having an opportunity for our weekend golfers to come out and play golf, whether it be members or pay to play, day play. John reduced the tournament schedule to like 15 tournaments this year. We had a little bit stronger turnout in each of the tournaments, with our strongest success being a tournament hosted by Adams State University's baseball program that had 104 players. It has been really, really well received. The course is in amazing condition. We were able to add a second greens roller this year, which helped with the tournament play. In past, we've been under a situation where we had to delay starting tournaments just simply because we could only get so much of the course set up in time to start the tournament. And when you're hosting tournaments with 104 players, you can't start everybody on hole one. It's got a shotgun, and so you put everybody out on different holes, and we just go off at a specific time. Having that additional equipment has been a really big help. Our greens are second to none. That goes to our staff, to our maintenance staff, to our superintendent and his crew. They have created a course that, while we still have water issues at times, when people come to Cattails, they constantly remark at how these are by far the best greens that they've played on in the state and in the area. So we've got people coming in, and it's going to continue to grow and be a really big positive thing for us. Back to kind of that member thing. So we heard a lot of grumblings as a board prior to joining in with the city about how members were no longer going to volunteer to do things with the golf course because they expected the city to take over and do everything. And that was obviously concerned because we had some really good quality members that were doing a lot. Hasn't changed. Our membership has, accepted the call and said, hey, it's amazing what the city is doing for us and allowing us to accomplish, but we still have to do our part. Schrader's Glass has been a very big part of what happens at Cattails Golf Course. There's a handful of members out there that are donating time, materials, doing different things. We were able to fix some areas, a tee box that had just really been beat up over the years. We were able to put in a curb system around it so that the carts won't cut the corner sharp. It allowed us to increase the size of the tee box, which allows us for a little bit better play. The staff also created a new tee box on one of the par threes. Makes the hole impossibly hard, but it's really great for competition. So just really good things going on that level. We also had an opportunity to demo a new piece of equipment that is kind of new out in the golf industry. It's called an Air 2 G2, and essentially it's like an aerator. In the past, we had to go in, punch holes in our greens, chop up the core that was removed, and fill the greens back in with sand. And what that really did is it makes the course not unplayable, but it makes it a piece where we cannot charge a regular everyday greens fee for that piece. So it really limits the income potential of the course for a number of days. Usually a course like Cattails, where we're shut down basically for at least 2.5 days per side, it really takes us out of play for about 10 days to 2 weeks of having to reduce our fees to off-season rates. This Air 2 G2 actually it has such little disturbance to the ground that we really don't ever have to come off of peak season rates, which allows us to maintain our our income, but also present a very, very viable product that people don't feel like it's a less than course. The really cool part about it is it's deepening the roots in the ground, and we don't just have to use this on our greens, which is what the scenario was like with our prior process. Now, when we have areas in the fairways or on the tee boxes that are dry, we can take this machine and alleviate some of those problems and essentially help deepen the roots and also hopefully lessen our need for water in that avenue too. So we haven't purchased the equipment. We're still trying to find a way to do that. But the company that let us borrow it, like everything, there's not a lot of these pieces of equipment out there. And they have offered to let us try to find a way to purchase this at a very, very discounted rate. So we're exploring that option as well. And hopefully we'll be able to make that come together. Memberships. Our membership base grew $40,000 this year. Obviously that's not small. The significant piece to me, obviously, as a member of Cattails for a long, long time, was watching our regular pay-to-play use go up. It also had an increase of about $40,000. So that means that we not only have members that are growing, a membership base that is growing, but we actually have members that are coming in and playing cattails on a more regular rate. And we have locals that are saying, hey, you know what? This course is amazing and we should get out there and enjoy it. So kudos to the city for helping us become who we are becoming and who we thought we could become out there. Couple just kind of quick things. Junior golf has really taken off. It is something that we know is the future of Cattails Golf Course. We have to grow our junior golf program. We had 48 juniors participate this year in junior golf. Our league, our men's league is as strong as ever, 24 teams. We have a couple other, we have a women's league and we have a co-ed sort of league. The co-ed thing is just a loosely, you show up and you play and there's little prizes at the end of the round. And it has been very, very well received among our members and local play. So water usage. So John may be able to give a little bit better feedback on the water, but essentially we've used 85 acre feet out of our 100.
No, that's right on the number.
Okay, so front nine use was 85 acre feet. And then the back nine this season was 99 acre feet. So, and that is 10 acre feet under the limit that we have for the back nine. So we've been very successful in having a very vibrant course with the amount of water that we have.
What was that number on the back?
99 acre feet.
110. Yeah.
So kind of the last things that we want to talk about is just our revenue. Some amazing things have gone on at Cattails with revenue. Our pro shop, I need to brag a little bit. John's done an amazing job of stocking merchandise in the pro shop. In the past, we've had a lot of members feedback of, well, it's the same old thing. There's nothing new. There's nothing I want. Our year-to-date pro shop sales in 2020 were $60,000. As of today, we're at $118,000 in pro shop sales. So obviously, John's done a very good job of bringing in the right stuff, but also, you know, having that increased play has helped us immensely. So as far as year-to-date expenses, the fiscal number is $809,561. Our budget was $873,000. And last year's number was $477,755. So Cattails is doing some pretty amazing things with the help of the city. I think that's all we have to present.
Okay, great presentation. We're going to open it up for council to make comments at this time. We'll start off with Councilor Vihil, then Counselor, I don't know if it was Carson or Hensley who were first, but we'll start off with Counselor Carson, then Counselor Hensley.
John and Eddie, thanks for coming in tonight. I'm ecstatic that things are just doing so well over there. Can you comment a little bit on the restaurant and how things are going there?
Yeah, so the restaurant, I mean, they've been doing good. There's a lot of learning in the first year in there. You know, there was a lot this summer where, I mean, they had some pretty brutal COVID staff issues too, you know, where there's some weeks where they had to close down for a whole week because of a worker getting it. So it was kind of tough on them. You know, that's when they got to make their hay is in the summertime to hold them over the winter. So now coming into the winter, they're putting out a lot of stuff for holiday parties and things like that to try and get through the winter. But yeah, I think they did a good job. They offered food that golfers like to eat, so that kept them happy. There's some stuff with hours and when they're open that might need to evolve a little bit next year. There was some instances where there was tournaments playing and there wasn't anywhere to get food. But like I said, they had their share of staffing issues this summer, and I think they'll learn from it and continue to grow. I know in the last 2 weeks out there, their dinner menu has been picking up quite a bit. So they think that they have some good momentum going into the winter. They're changing out their menu for different specials and stuff like that going into the winter. So yeah, I think they're doing okay. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Carson, followed by Counselor Hensley, then Counselor Brawls.
I just wanted to say thank you guys. You guys are doing a great job, and you know we were a little bit nervous about the venture going in, and you guys have just outperformed. So good job. And I mean, you know, that course is just gotten better, and it's always been a wonderful course. I love that course, but yeah, it's phenomenal. So you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Hensley.
So I would say as the council representative on the board for the last 6 years, I saw the whole process. And I could go on, and obviously I'm ecstatic with everything that's going on. It met and exceeded our expectations of what was going to happen. But what I would say more than anything, my vision, and I had mentioned it prior, and it's really going through, is that as a board, my big concern was, I remember all those meetings we'd have and everything was about budget and how to have enough money to do the things that needed to happen. And I just really, what I saw and got the buy-in for was that if the city did take over the way they did, is allowed the board to actually focus on golf and focus on the things such as the tournaments, the junior league, how to come up with new events and all of the things that is happening now. And I will tell you, it's great when we have our meetings now, it truly is the focus of how to make that golf course better, how to grow it, all of those type of things. And it just makes it really enjoyable. And so for me, that's one of the visions I see. And I know that allowing the board to do what they're doing now is what's part of the reason why it's doing so well. So just thought I'd share that.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Brawls, and then we'll go to our Zoom attendee, Counselor Griego.
Yeah, I want to say thank you. The course is in great shape. I think I played like 16 different courses this year, and Cattails is in the best shape as far as the greens. I really like what you've done to the greens. So great job, because I think that's what will attract people to come. And I see that you increased your revenues 50% this year. Can you increase them another 50% next year?
I mean, we have honestly a lot of good momentum going into next year. We have a lot of excited people that have been buying the monthly pass all year that can't wait to buy full memberships next year. So, I mean, we're excited for it. And I mean, it's me and Brett's goal to improve each year on something, you know, and with the bunker project coming up and things like that, we're going to keep improving our course and hopefully, you know, get bigger and bigger tournaments. Like this year, we were able to host men's and women's regionals for high school. So we're getting our hat in the ring to host a state tournament in the future. So, I mean, we're excited for it.
Hey, good. Yeah, because Cattails really is a hidden gem.
It is.
Of Colorado and New Mexico, really. So great job and keep going.
Thank you.
One other thing too, Counselor Broyles, is I didn't touch on it. I got really excited about what the pro shop has done, but overall, in 2020, where I think we all can realize that we had a pretty banner year. Our revenues were $490,000. In 2021, they were $649,000. So overall, across the board, we've made some significant gains.
Oh, my God.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That brings us to Councilor Griego.
Thank you, Mayor. Eddie, John, thank you guys for coming and bringing an update. And thank the rest of your board for sticking in there with us. You know, I had two questions. My first question, I really like the fact that we got 48 junior golfers out there that, like you talked about, that's our future. Is that something we're working with the rec department to maybe put a program together where we can offer something through the rec, like we do other rec programs?
Yeah, so we do. I know Andy puts us in the brochure for the summer programs and all that stuff. So we get marketed through the rec program and all that still the same way. They just come to Cattails to register for it.
Good deal. My second question, you were trying to make everything work out there, and I've had an opportunity to eat over at the restaurant and looked around and saw what could we do to further help the restaurant and the people to enjoy their time out there. And I've noticed that there's no doors or anything out to that patio. You're like boxed in. If you want to go out to the patio, you got to take like a maze and go around the other side. So I was thinking that maybe in the future, we should be able to open up one of those glass panes and put some doors there where you can have access to that patio. And I think that would really open that whole thing up and people can enjoy going out there and eating on the patio. Even the people that are working the restaurant, it make them easier to go out there and help the people. So that's something I think we need to look at in the very, very near future. And I don't know if you guys have looked at that at all, John.
Yeah, pretty much every tenant that's been in there has talked about that. We've gotten bids and quotes to look at doing that, but I mean, back in that position, the golf board definitely wasn't in the position to afford doing that. But now, you know, I'm sure we could go through the proper channels and see if that's something we can add to the CIP or something down the road and maybe get that accomplished for them.
And you know, rather than down the road, I'd like to see if you've already gotten bids on it. I'd like to see something, you know, maybe some updated bids on what something like that would cost. You know, I don't think it costs that much to open up maybe a couple of those sliding doors or something, you know, and make it accessible, because that's a nice patio to go out there, especially in the summertime, to sit down. And there's times that if they're short-handed, they keep that patio closed.
Yep, I can pull some bids for you.
Okay, I appreciate that. And like I say, anything to help out that restaurant, that thing it's been in a hole for about 10 years, you know, and anything that we can help to bring them out of that hole to make it successful, I think it'd be a positive thing for the city and for the golfers and the restaurant people who run it. So thank you once again. And I appreciate all what you guys have done and keep the job going again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so I guess I'll go ahead and wrap things up then. Thank you all so very much for a very thorough presentation. I'm very impressed with all of the growth numbers that you provided tonight. You had a growth in revenue, 649,000, I believe. Also growth in your membership. That's amazing as well. And also revenue in the pro shop. That's very promising. Keep up the great work. We're very proud of the work that you all are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, development services. First reading of ordinance number 25-2021, an ordinance amending section 21-2405 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Alamosa, amending short-term rental regulations.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to do a
welcome.
little bit of a tag team tonight since
Okay.
Rachel's on Zoom. I'm going to make an attempt at opening this up and then turn it over to her in case I've missed something. I think to
Before you
start,
start too, can I just tell her to unmute just in case? So when she starts talking, she won't be muted. Is that okay?
sure.
Rachel, you want to go ahead and unmute? That way, when you start talking, you'll be already unmuted.
I don't think she could hear you.
I don't think she can hear me.
I think she's confident in her ability to hit the unmute button when she
Okay.
starts talking.
All right.
I will have to apologize, Mr. Mayor, but I will. I have dogs, and if I don't mute,
Okay.
they will chime in.
Okay, that's fine. No worries. It's all good. Tag team, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to start first with, I really appreciated Rachel and Deacon's efforts when they started researching this to really have a balanced approach to it, because we really do value the economy we have with our short-term rentals. There's some experiences that tourists want that don't involve a hotel, especially when you're traveling with a family and it starts getting bigger. There's times that the hotels might be full. So there's definitely a value that Alamosa has with this. We were also balancing some of the concerns you heard from Laura and others that you've heard in the neighborhood, where sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes maybe the properties can create a nuisance. And it depends on who's owning it and operating it and those types of things. We're also trying to balance, individual property rights and what the impact of this growing in our community can have on not only affordable but attainable housing. And I think that's a key point to bring from a vocabulary perspective. Some of the debate I was seeing on Facebook and other areas seemed to give the impression that the main and only reason we were looking at this issue was because of affordable housing and it taking some of the stock out of that. When we've just finished our housing study, what we've learned is we have gaps where the market is not sustaining the housing supply up to 300,000. So it's the whole spectrum, almost up to 350,000, that we do not have enough supply in. And it's not that we want to hinder individuals' abilities to have a diversified income and to grow their wealth, but we're also as a community struggling with people finding housing for their primary family. And that's something that is very important. When we looked at our code in 2017, when we were doing that big update, we only had 3. And so we were like, we don't need anything related to short-term rentals. We only have 3 in our community. From 2017 to now, we now have 24 short-term rentals. And again, 24 is not breaking the bank or anything like that, but that is showing that there is growth and it's somewhat significant. And in fact, in the last 90 days, we've added 3. And so this is something that is continuing. So it's not wanting to stop it. It's not wanting to make it impossible for people to go into this field and provide this service to the tourists in our community, but it's trying to balance of the city not having really any control at all right now. And is there anything that's needed to help protect the neighborhoods? So to get a little bit into what was in the council communication, I wanted to share, we did do a definition where short-term rentals are essentially less than 30 days. So if someone is doing more long-term rentals, this does not impact this. It's when people are advertising their location for 30 days or less for short-term rentals. Additionally, for those individuals that are leasing out a room and they live there, or the casita in their backyard, those are more, they're not classified as the short-term rentals. That's Airbnb. And so those were carved out. We took a look at over 20 communities, and Holly, if you want to just put up that matrix, that Excel worksheet. I'm not going to go through all of that. We did that through a work session, but I'm just using this to show that across Colorado, there are a lot of communities, and it's not just the mountain communities that are taking a look at the short-term rentals. And there's a lot of different reasons they're looking at it, but part of it is from an affordability perspective, not affordable housing, but affordability perspective of the supply of housing. And it's because of the potential impacts that it can have on the residents. And that's why you'll see for those categories across the top of the matrix, there's no one size fits all. So there's some that take a look at distance requirements, so they're not overwhelming a neighborhood. There's some that are taking a look at a cap for citywide, so it doesn't exceed the certain type of housing. There's some that just want to make sure that there's someone there locally who's going to manage it, that the rules are posted. So it's all over the place on what some of these communities are doing. In the Valley, though, we're not alone. Rio Grande County, Conejos County, La Jera, Del Norte, South Fork, and Crestone all regulate short-term rentals right now. So this is not a new concept, and it's not new to the Valley. Creed and Monte Vista are also in discussions on regulations. What we've learned from watching other communities where this happened much more quickly is if you don't get in front of this, it can then get out of control. And that's what we're hoping to avoid. As I get into a little bit more of what the regulations are that we're looking at, I also want to remind council, it's not an all or nothing. So as I read some of the public comments and those types of things, there's a lot that we're recommending that doesn't seem controversial at all. And I'm not sure very many people would argue. The focus seems to be more on the distance and if we should be limiting how many are within a certain distance. So I want to just make sure that as we go through this, there's a lot that's before you from a recommendation perspective to get at some of these different issues without being too much of a burden on the industry. So if we look, the most controversial one was, should there be a separation between short-term rentals? And the reason we were recommending that there be one is two reasons, actually. The first one is when you start creating distance requirements or restrictions, that does create at some point, you're going to run out of places where you can have short-term rentals. So it does have the effect of making sure they don't grow beyond what the housing capacity is and can take too much of that housing out of regular home ownership. The other, though, for the 300, rather than just some communities say we don't want anything more than 5% of our housing stock to be short-term rentals. Instead of doing that, the reason we're doing the radius is because also recognizing that potential impact that they can have on a neighborhood. Now, I'm not saying they all have it. Some are very well run, but we have heard from residents where they are running into issues. And right now, there's frankly nothing the city can do about that unless it's something that really gets into that nuisance. Like if there's a huge loud party, someone calls the police and it's a noise violation, we can do something like that. But some of the other nuisances we're not necessarily able to get at. And so that provides the beginning of trying to maintain the integrity of a neighborhood with a distance. We're requiring a notice to neighbors once the license is issued. So not to get permission, but we just want to make sure the neighborhoods are notified that there is one going in. I don't think there's anything controversial with that. We want to make sure that there's a designated responsible agent who can respond to issues and emergencies. I don't think there's anything controversial about that. We are not creating any new fees. We are requiring a specific license for this, but there's no fee. And anyone who's been operating a short-term rental knows that they were supposed to already have a business license and they're already supposed to be paying the hotel motel taxes and those sales taxes. So there is not one penny of an increase that's coming to the city from having this regulation. And so I think it's important to point that out as well. We're clarifying parking standards. We really didn't have very strict parking standards. That ties into some of the concerns we were hearing from the neighbors. We also are putting, let me just take a quick look at the notes. I do want to point on the circles that Planning Commission recommended 500 feet. Staff's actually recommending 300 feet. And here in a minute, we'll take a look at the map of what that looks like. In regards to parking, properties with on-site parking are allowed 1 on-street parking space. Properties with no on-site parking are allowed 2 on-street parking spaces. So we were tightening that up. We make it clear that they are not supposed to be rented out for just parties, that they really are supposed to be intended for short-term rentals, someone staying 1 or 2 nights or more type of situation. We did do a lot of public outreach by sending letters to the owners, banks and the realtors. And then Holly, if you can share one of those maps. I'll talk about the maps, and then after I talk about the maps, I'll turn it over to Rachel in case I've missed something. So this first one is to give you a feel of the difference between 300 feet, which is the purple, and the orange, which is the 500 feet. So this is the same map that you guys saw in your work session. Holly, if you can go to the other map, I'll spend a little bit more time on that. And you might have to make that other map a tiny bit smaller, or that's a good view. That can work. So this is if we did 300 feet with the current, you can see there are areas, where we are reaching a little bit of some saturation, but there's still a lot of areas in our community that someone can do a short-term rental. And there's still a lot of opportunity out there from a short-term rental perspective. And so that's a good map to depict kind of what our current situation is. And if we were to implement a 300-foot buffer. Rachel, at this time, I'll turn it over to you just in case I've missed something. And if you're talking, you're on mute.
She was freezing up a little bit earlier, Heather.
Rachel, if you want to turn your video off, sometimes that might help if you're having bandwidth issues.
Okay, does that help?
Yes, we
I
can
had
hear
to
you.
leave and rejoin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you were just cutting out a little bit, so I switched to my phone and now I'm back. No one gets to see my face. That you have covered it beautifully, Heather. I mean, I think that this really is trying to create the best balance we can possibly create while trying to respect the investment that people have made in short-term rentals in our community and respecting the fact that this community does probably need another hotel. I mean, we have reached a critical mass where there aren't enough hotel rooms and they do seem to be overpriced. But unfortunately, city planning is a balance of all uses. So it's trying to protect our housing stock, which, as Heather said, is a spectrum. I mean, so some of the nicer houses that were mentioned earlier, those are affordable houses for certain people with 2 income streams in our community. I mean, that's a teacher and a nurse that are buying their first home or one of those nicer houses in Alamosa. So I mean, to say that these aren't quote unquote affordable is to say that affordable is just a small portion of our housing stock. It's not. It's a huge spectrum. And so some of these houses that are being purchased by investors, that means they can't be purchased by homeowners and by families. And then again, I know that it's going to put a little bit of a limitation on our tourism industry, which is the last thing we want to do because it's doing so well. And we've had this record visitorship over the summer with the Great Sand Dunes. And we want to encourage that, but we also want a hotel downtown. So we're trying to balance all of those uses, so if there's a little bit more stress on our short-term rental market and a little more stress on our hotel market, all of a sudden it becomes financially viable for someone to build that hotel that we want downtown so much. So, I mean, it doesn't serve just one group of uses. Community planning is trying to serve the best purposes for everyone. And it is not a money-making venture for the city. I mean, the business license fees are $15. They've always been $15, and you pay lodging taxes. So even though it's, added tracking capacity for my staff and a handful of other things, this is just part of what the city does. And this really is just about serving, the greatest long-term planning goals of our community.
Thank you, Rachel. And Mayor, with that, if you have any questions.
Okay, I'll turn it back over here to council and we'll start with, to be fair, let's see if Councilor Griego has his hand up this time. That way we can go to him first if he's.
Just one comment, Mayor. I didn't have my hand up, but thank you. The individuals that spoke up against it, this is the first reading, and I would invite them to come back to a public hearing where they would have the opportunity to really express themselves and and provide whatever they need to council. So I would, like I said, they're probably listening in right now, but the public hearings, I think, is the opportune time to express their thoughts and give council some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grego. We'll start off with Councilor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
So when we're looking at the, so I agree with the 300 feet versus the 500 feet. I appreciate the distance there. I think that makes some sense. So thank you for adjusting that recommendation from Planning Commission. When we're looking at the circles that are already on, we're not going to ask any of these to change, right? Like they would be grandfathered in and be fine with where they are.
Correct. And if anyone already owned their property and was thinking about doing it and they come in tomorrow and get their license, they're grandfathered in as well.
Okay.
So until 10 days after the second reading, people would be considered grandfathered in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Brawls and then Councilor Carson.
How about if someone sells an Airbub, the property, does the Airbub go with the sale or what happens there?
No, the license is not transferable. So they would need to come. And so then you're probably asking if, from a circle perspective, what does that mean? So Rachel, did you want to help answer that?
Yeah, so that's purposeful. We want every time the property changes hands for it to be a new opportunity for it to be a home and not a short-term rental. And for that to be at the discretion of each new property owner. And then it also opens the neighborhood up. So if someone buys one of those homes, decides they want to live in it or make it a long-term rental, then theoretically it's up to the nearby property owners to keep track. I mean, the maps will be available in our office. We're even thinking about having them available on our website. And so it's a dynamic system. So whether or not you can have one right now, theoretically, if the property changes hands, you might be able to have one in the future. I mean, it's as much as possible encouraging the fair market, whereas still trying to keep our housing stock protected.
But that's obviously Council Broyles, if you wanted further discussion on, you know, for those that are grandfathered in right now, for the opportunity for that grandfather status to continue, that would be potentially something you would want to discuss.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Brawls. Councilor Carson.
I just have a technical question about the ordinance itself. Who's the administrator, I guess, in paragraph D1? And secondly, I just don't understand what extraordinary fire, is that like something that they could be, denied the permit for? I just have issue with that paragraph, I guess. I don't understand who the administrator is, and I think the paragraph kind of is extremely strict and could be used to easily deny a permit, in my understanding of it. So just enlighten me, Eric, please.
Yes, so the administrator is a defined term in the UDC, so it's not specifically defined in this ordinance, which is a portion of, or would be a portion of the UDC. And as defined in the UDC, it is we may need to relook at this now that we have a development director, but it is the Public Works Director or his or her designee. So it's probably going to be the development director, I would think. And then I guess I'm not quite sure what in particular you think is problematic in terms.
I guess I don't understand the language. What's an extraordinary fire hazard? And the last sentence is kind of broad, I guess. I also have issue with the 300 feet in that map. It looks really saturated. I'd really like to see what 150 feet looks like. Because to me, it seems like, you got two houses on either side of this rental. You start getting into the third, fourth, fifth house. I mean, if they're making that big of a nuisance, it's obviously, we got to take care of it anyway. But I really don't see any issue necessarily with the application of law and rule to it. I really don't think we're hindering anybody's business. I just have some kind of technical issues with it. I think 300 feet looked big to me, so I'd probably like to see what a 150-foot map looks like. But I don't see any issues. I just didn't really understand that first paragraph, I guess.
Right, and so the purpose for having an inspection to look at whether there's an extraordinary fire hazard or other circumstances, the city building inspector is overwhelmed. And so we do not have a handle on all of the code compliance conditions of every single building in the city by any means. This gives us a chance to have the code inspector do an inspection of a house that's going to see a lot of turnover use and a lot of exposure to different people who wouldn't have any, like if you're in a 1-year lease, you've got an ability to deal with your landlord and say, hey, there's a roof leak that's dripping on me.
Okay.
If you're just there for a night, you know, you're not going to deal with that kind of stuff. And so this gives us the opportunity to have the building inspector make sure that the building is sound. And really, that's the only, if everything else is compliant, if it's within the distance limitations and all of those kinds of things, the administrator is going to issue a license as a matter of course, unless there's some problem with the building itself.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, I wasn't at the,
And
at the
I
work.
might, oh,
Go ahead, Rachel.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to say that the extraordinary fire hazard would be a determination made both by the building official and the chief fire official. So it would be a dual inspection and not made by my office alone.
Good deal. Thank you.
Counselor Vihil.
So I wasn't here for the work session. We had this a few weeks ago. I was at a parent-teacher conferences at school, but I'm really glad that we're doing something about this. Over the last week, I've been approached by many people about this. I'm sure you all have too, council, with emails and phone calls and that. I talked to Mr. Bautista, who owns a quarter of these. We had a great conversation. I got his perspective. I got a perspective of a couple who works as like property managers for one of these. It's the one right across the street from my house. And the one across the street from my house is owned by a couple, a business couple out of Boulder. And then down the street and to the right is another one. So if you look at the map here, in Miss Hensley's and mine and the mayor's neighborhood, we have a bunch. So an idea I had, and I don't know if we should talk about it now or wait till the second reading, is can we maybe do like a cap in the wards? Something to think about, something to ponder. I don't think that the city's trying to go after the owners of these short-term rentals. I have been in a couple. I was actually in one of Mr. Bautista's a couple months ago for a wedding, and it's a fantastic property. They do a fantastic job. It's clean. I don't think we're trying to go after these folks, but at the same time, as Rachel said, and I think Heather said too, we need to balance this stuff. And we have, no, there wasn't a wedding there. They were there to stay for a wedding. I should have cleared that up. Thank you, Mr. Carson. And I really appreciate that. Like the one across the street from my house, I had some concerns. I'm like, I don't know who's going to be here from night to night. I don't, stuff like that. And we have folks who live next to him who have concerns about parties and who's actually there and that kind of thing. And then another thing I want us to think about is the quality of the neighborhood in terms of like having community. And I would like my kids to grow up with other neighborhood kids. And I think we all had that. And I think that's something that we should think about too. So I do have a lot more questions. And I think maybe, because Miss Heather Parka and Chuck and Laura all said, maybe we need to slow down and talk more and offer more perspectives. I know Mr. Broyles just had a question on some things that maybe we need to look more into. If that's an option, I don't know, Council.
Thank you, Councilor Vihil. We'll circle back to that question. I see Councilor Carson had his mic on.
Just to comment to your point, I agree with you. I think it is important to have a neighborhood with some permanent people there. And if the neighborhood is that saturated, then that's a very good point. I didn't understand that. Heather is one of my neighbors. They live in my neighborhood and they do have a couple, but we don't feel that because we already have a ton of people that actually live there, you know, everybody, all the houses are occupied by families, so these Airbnbs don't really affect us. They're somewhat separated. So I could understand that point. So I don't disagree on the cap and awards. Maybe we look at something like that, you know, so many within a distance. I'm not sure about that, but it's a good idea as well, something to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. And Mayor, if I can also add, I also talked to another couple folks who are young entrepreneurs, and they want a piece of the pie. They want to get into the game too. And I respect those wishes as well. And they're worried that if we put a cap or if we have too much of a buffer, they won't be able to buy a house to turn into a short-term rental. So I also wanted to offer that perspective. You did answer, Heather. I did get a question about the grandfather. It's after 10 days of the second reading. And after that, you're not grandfathered in, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I also had this question. Can a room in a house be a short-term rental?
Yes, but it's not going to fall under these restrictions. It's going to fall under an Airbnb.
Okay.
Not an Airbnb, just
Oh,
a
sorry.
regular bed and breakfast.
Bed and breakfast. Wrong terminology. Thank you.
Like the Brits do. Probably have to serve baked tomatoes and stuff.
Okay, thank you. And then, can a person go between a long-term rental and a short-term rental and kind of flip-flop after so many months and whatever?
They can, they would just want to maintain their licenses.
Okay.
And again, I think Rachel said they're $15 or $25 annual for the license. So they just would want to make sure they maintain their license.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, we were gonna circle back to, Councilor Griego. Before I go to Councilor Griego, I just want to make sure that all of Councilor Vihill's concerns were answered.
We can obviously talk about capping at the ward. My initial reaction is I'm not sure that's accomplishing what you think it's going to accomplish. Because the buffer is to try to make sure that there's not one neighborhood that has 8 of them type of thing. And so if you cap it by a ward, since we only have 4 wards, that's a bigger area and they could all be within 3 blocks of each other. And so without the buffer, you're not getting that neighborhood protection type of thing. If you're interested in just having a cap, I'd say cap it either by ward or by the whole city, but you're not accomplishing maintaining the integrity of the neighborhood.
Thank you for that answer, Heather. And then another idea I had, council, is what if we thought of it like if the more housing that's developed in town, and then so maybe we cap it, and then we say for every new house or family dwelling that's built, then we can raise our STR percentage. I don't know.
Okay, so.
I would like to
Go ahead.
Good, Rachel.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I
No,
was
go
just
ahead.
going to say that land use codes are living documents. And land use codes should be living documents. That's the beauty of land use codes. And that's the beauty of small community government that is receptive to the dynamics in our communities and the needs of our constituents. Because if it turns out that in a year or so that this isn't something that's viable for our community, or say we have managed to make strides in catching up to our 515 of the housing stock that's lacking, if we have that, then I think that this is something that we could reevaluate. But I think this is just a snapshot in time, and we're trying to get a hold of some of these things before they become a real problem.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barrett. Okay, good. We'll go to Councilor, Councilor Griego, then Councilor Daniel.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. I had a question on a comment that Councilor Broyles made on the grandfather deal. Whereas if you sell that piece of property that's already, there's too many in that 300 distance, do you lose that grandfather clause?
as the way it is written right now, the license does not transfer with the property. So that license would go away, and if they are within an area that is already within the other 300, they were close to another one, then it would not be able to turn it over to an Airbnb. That is something if council wants to discuss, since we're still at a smaller number, that's certainly something you can discuss if you want to change that in the ordinance.
And go ahead, Rachel.
I will say that there's sort of a loophole in that. If you wanted to put your property in the name of an LLC and then actually sell your LLC that owns the home, theoretically you could keep your short-term rental license if it's not owned in your own name.
Because I had some questions from people that live out of town that, you know, when you're gonna ask somebody to be in town to be responsible, they're probably, some of them are thinking of selling those. You know, and if they're gonna, if they're gonna lose their grandfather clause to, then that investment basically is against them. So I appreciate what you just said, Rachel, and that's something that maybe they should look at. But that's maybe something that council needs to discuss, you know, that because that's a pretty good investment for people that own 2, 3, or 4 of them. And if they want to sell them out and recoup their investment and let somebody else continue with those homes, I think that they should have the right to do that. So I think that's something that we need to discuss, that if they're sold, I don't know how you put it, that the grandfather stays on there or something.
We would change the portion of the language that talks about that the license doesn't transfer with the property. And we would make sure we're capturing that desire to allow just for those properties that have been grandfathered in.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Are you welcome? Thank you, Councilor Grego. Okay, Councilor Daniel,
Thank you, Mayor.
welcome.
So I wanted to say, I do agree with Councilor Griego, what he just stated, that I think that would be fair to the owners that we currently have, that when we didn't have these to start, I think that's a really neat, I think that would be appropriate. And then I do disagree with Councilor Vigil, though. I think the 300 feet or whatever distance feet versus a cap as a total number or a percentage of our housing stock makes the most sense, because it does keep the balance in the neighborhoods, I think, in a more equitable way. Or could, I mean, of course, depending on where people build or, you know, decide short-term rentals, but I think it allows the opportunity for it to be more equitable. And I would support that versus a total cap.
Good.
Okay, any other comments?
Let me just
Go ahead.
throw one in,
Sure.
Mayor, while you're thinking about it, and council's comments may make this a moot point, but to Rachel's comment that there is kind of a loophole. If you put it in an LLC, then you can just transfer your LLC and there hasn't been any change in ownership of the property. If that was something that you were concerned about, you could close that loophole. There's very standard language that would also tie it to a change in ownership of the LLC.
Yeah.
From your comments, you probably don't care, but that loophole is, you can close it. And if you are concerned about the kind of issues that Rachel was addressing in terms of indicating that the intention behind limiting the license to not go with the land is to get turnover and bring housing stock potentially back in, then you might want to think about closing that loophole.
Okay, so is now the time to finish these conversations about this?
No, I think you can stew on them for a couple of weeks
Okay.
and bring it up again
At the hearing?
at your next meeting.
Or let's process that
Yeah,
a
let's
little bit.
process.
Thank you, City Attorney. It depends on what you want to accomplish at the next meeting. So if you want on the next agenda just a discussion item, then you can stew on it and we can discuss it on the next agenda. But if it's something where you feel like we're starting to kind of come to a consensus and you may want to do first reading tonight, have us make some changes, such as that those that are grandfathered can transfer it with the property. If you want 150 instead of 300, if you want some different things like that, if you want to take the buffer out completely, we can make those changes for second reading type of thing. So you may want to stew enough to give direction for what you want to accomplish at your next meeting.
I think it'd be a little bit more productive if we at least give some guidance from this point on from council, from your perspective. So council, if you could give some feedback right now for them so that they can have some things to work on. So when we come back the next time, we'll have some additional things to review to make sure that your points are brought up. This would be the time to do so.
Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, Counselor Grego.
yes, I'd like for them to look at that grandfather and just as Heather mentioned, transfer that license with that grandfather if you were to sell that property.
Okay,
So
thank you, Council.
That's one direction I'd like to see it happen.
And if there's enough support for that, my recommendation is if we do have a motion for first reading tonight, that someone just include in their language to have that language be changed for second reading to allow for the transfer for grandfathered properties.
Okay, so when we get to that point, because I'm quite sure we're gonna have.
Yep, I'm
Few
just
more
trying to
things.
keep track
Okay.
of, because I see a lot of head nodding when that's brought up.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Carson.
I'd like to see that buffer be, at least, I want to see what it looks like at like 200 feet, probably 150 feet. I'm not really sure. To me, it seemed like it was pretty broad. So I'd just like to see what that looks like a little smaller. You know, just on a map. That's it.
And we can do that. And here's a quick question maybe for Rachel. Typical lot width in, say, an EN zone versus and other zones. If you start dropping it down around 150 feet, I think you're looking at maybe 2 lots or one
That's what
lot
I'm
in
gauging
between
off
or
is
something.
my lot width. And so I'm just kind of looking at a couple houses out. I don't think you need to. If somebody's disturbing 2 houses down, we gotta do something about it. You know, if there's a ruckus there like that. So I'm just thinking that 300 feet seems a little broad. I'd just like to see what it looks like.
So what I would say is have a motion that you can leave the 300 in there right now as a placeholder, knowing that you can swap out a different number on second reading, and we'll have that information for you.
Yeah, we'll just come back with a map that shows that.
I'm fine with that.
All right, thank you, Counselor Carson. Counselor Vio?
Yeah, another question on the 300 feet. Is that from the front door or from the corner of the lot?
Rachel, do you want to explain that? So I know do you put it from the property line 300 feet out, and if it touches the property line of the other properties? Did that make sense? Do you want me to explain it better?
No, I understand.
Okay.
That was just a question I had from meeting with these folks. And then I guess I have a question for Mr. Carson, if we reduce it to 150 or 200, wouldn't that allow more of them into the neighborhood?
Yeah, I guess it would. I mean, I'm not arguing it. Just to me, when you look at it on a big map, it just seemed like you're covering, I'm looking at it right now, and you're covering 18 homes. You know, that one rental is affecting directly 18 homes around it. I mean, I don't live in a neighborhood as dense as yours, so I can't necessarily argue with you. On a back fence, if your backyard is right up against someone else's, that may be an issue. To me, it just looks really big. But again, I don't live in that neighborhood. They don't affect me the same way in my neighborhood. So, you know, just going off a personal point, I'd like to just see what it looks like. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker. I just would really like to see what it looks like, even at 200 feet, because 150, you know, you're just gauging the half mark. But even 200 feet may be a little bit less intrusive, I guess, is what I'm thinking. Yeah, I mean, our lots are quite a bit bigger in my area, so that's the difference.
So I would say I would like to see it the 200 too.
200, yeah.
I
200 would
wanna
be
see what it
fine.
looks
I'd be
like.
all right with that.
Okay.
And then is there any discussion about maybe extending that time period of the 10 days after the second reading?
Is
that by statute or?
That's just when ordinances take effect.
Okay.
So in other words, you're grandfathered in until the ordinance takes effect. And the ordinance takes effect 10 days after it's passed on second reading.
We could add,
You could do a
we could
different
add
effective date.
language.
Yeah,
We
you could say
add
January
language.
1.
Yeah, this would be effective January 1st. So then people could have a mad dash.
Well, that's a concern of mine because people have read this and they're like, oh man, I better buy another house real quick so I can get grandfathered in and send STR and this and that. Well, and
You
they're like,
can,
I don't know
you
if I
can
get it done
have,
in 10
you can
days.
have the ordinance go into effect January 1st, February, March. You can extend that out.
I would like council to consider that maybe January 1st.
I don't think that's our life.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Vihil. Okay, Council.
Greg was waving.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me make sure I didn't miss someone. I think I saw Councilor Hensley mic on before yours, and I just wanted to make sure I'm mindful of that. Did you have something you wanted to say? You're good? Okay, and Councilor Vihil, you're good? Okay, Councilor Griego, then Councilor Daniel, go ahead.
I had one more thought. What happens if somebody buys 4 or 5 lots and builds about 4 or 5 of those short-term rentals? Does this buffer play a role in that?
Well, it depends on when they're doing that. So if they do it after they're not grandfathered in, they can only be within 200 or 300, whatever that buffer is. So they can buy as many lots as they want. They just can't be within that buffer area.
See, and I disagree with that because once you buy your property, I think we're putting a lot of restrictions on it. And if they're in an area where you want to develop the property, and we're stopping them from developing it and bringing those tourists that we're talking about into our town, sure, they pay whoever owns the short-term rentals, but they go out and spend money in our community. So I think that's a big form of economic development. So I think that's something that we need to look at too. I don't know if Eric's even thought about that, but if I'm an investor and I want to buy, and their money's the hotels are so expensive that I want to build about 4 or 5 of these, and I can't do it because of a buffer.
So the other thing I'll mention is, what we want to avoid is if this continues to grow, still having to come with standards and not allowing grandfathered. So if we can get whatever standards we're comfortable with in place, then that provides guidance where people should be investing. And so there's still plenty of places in town from that one map you can see where they can invest and they can do short-term rentals. That way there are no surprises. So that's the only caution I have is that from watching other communities and what's happened, it really is better to get in front of this rather than it to get ahead of us.
Because basically what they're doing right now is buying some houses and turning them into these short-term rentals, fixing them up. Well, if somebody wants to really put some nice homes out there and rent them out, I don't see why would we stop them because of a buffer. That's something I think we need to look at.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Councilor Griego. Councilor Daniel?
Thank you, Mayor. So I know I agreed with Councilor Griego earlier, but on that last point, Councilor Griego, I disagree with you. I think one of the points
Just a thought.
It was a thought. But one of the points I think is that we're also trying to develop neighborhoods. And when someone buys just a bunch of short-term rentals in one spot and we don't look at these buffers, the whole reason for the buffer is so neighborhood can develop and manage the things that Councilor Vihil was speaking about. The other thing, Council, about the 10 days. So by the time we see this in December, I'm just gonna throw it out there. By the time we see this in December, it's gonna be super close to January 1st. I know that was the day that we were looking at. So if we really want to give people time, I have to tell you, I think I disagree with that. I'm still processing it, so I don't want to stand firm either way. But we may need to look past January 1st because we're going to be awful close to January 1st, and it may just be the 10-day mark. I'm like, I haven't done the math, but thinking, plus it's the holidays. And so if we did want to give people the space that you all are talking about, again, I'm not sure if I agree with that, but if we did want to do that, going a little bit past that holiday time may actually give them the work and the space you would want them to have.
Okay. Thank you. Counselor Carson, go ahead.
I agree with you on the homes in one neighborhood. I think that would be counter of what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah, I think we just wait closer to when we're done with the ordinance, and then we establish a date of, when they could do it, because that could also, possibly give a good injection in 30 days into the real estate market of some loans and people trying to jump on some of that. So yeah, I think we get a little closer to the end, and then we can determine an end date or, a date for that to start.
Okay, Steph, is that enough guidance?
It is, so it's up to you if you want to do a first reading, noting that we're using a 300 as a placeholder right now for the buffer, that we want to change the language to where the license can transfer for those properties that are grandfathered in, and to take a look at extending the grandfather time for a second reading. Or you can just say, as Heather just said, yeah.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, let's get ready to start voting here. Okay, Ms. Martinez.
And Counselor Griego, what is your vote?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, council, for bringing up all of those discussion items. Great job. And thank you, staff. Okay, that brings us up to the next item, B, second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 23-2021 and ordinance amending section 21-4-504H2A.
Thank you. Sorry. I was making sure that, never mind. The metal fence, this is second reading. This is a slight change. Staff had initially thought that maybe there was discretion to approve some of the metal fencing that you're seeing. It does look nice. It does match some of the other types of fencing. And so this would just clarify that language to allow the use of that type of fabrication for fences.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I will open up a public hearing for ordinance number 23-2021 and ordinance amending section 21-4-405H2A of Code of Ordinances of the City of Alamosa to specify allowed metal fencing materials. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to come up to the podium and make any comments in regards to this, please do so at this moment. Okay, I don't see anyone in the audience who have any comments. So we'll move to the Zoom participants and see if there's anyone on Zoom who would like to raise their hand. Ms. Martinez, can you show them how to raise their hand or share with them how to raise their hand so I can recognize them?
Yes, sir. If you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak for this ordinance, use the raise your hand feature on the bottom of your screen. Then it'll raise your hand and we'll know you want to speak. And if you're on a telephone, it'll be *9.
Okay. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, so we'll go and officially close the public hearing and bring it back to council. I saw Councilor Behill with his mic on first, then Councilor Carson.
I just want to move that we approve ordinance number 23-2021.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? No. Okay, if you could start voting, please. Ms. Martinez. I think you got to ask
And
Councilor
Counselor
Griego.
Griego, what is your
Yeah.
vote?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I interrupt 1 second? On your previous ordinance number 25, there was a motion and second, but there was no public hearing set. Is that just for the record? Should we set that public hearing or not?
Thank you, Councilor Griego, for bringing that to our attention. Let's go ahead and someone set that public hearing.
It would be set for December 1st.
Okay, all right.
Just
December
to
1st.
clarify the record.
Thank you, Councilor Griego. Appreciate that. It's been done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that brings us to the next item under IT, first reading of ordinance number 24-2021, renewal of the IGA with the City of Monte Vista for the provisions of information technology services.
Thank you, Mayor. For the
welcome.
past 5 years, we've had an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Monte Vista to have them utilize our IT staff for their municipality. It's been a very fruitful partnership. I think it's helped both communities. One, it's allowed us to have more staff than we would normally, which from a vacation or a turnover perspective gives us a little bit more of consistency and ability to get through those times. And there's a lot of information that's shared between the communities when you're sharing staff. And so I think it's been a very beneficial partnership. That initial IGA, we are charging $58,000 for that service. The IGA locked in that number, and that doesn't really recognize when we do pay increases or if there's increases for insurance or retirement, those types of things. So this new IGA before you does two things. The first is it changes it from a locked in number to a percentage number. And so it would be 20% of the IT director that Monte Vista would reimburse for, 10% of the systems analyst, 10% of a tech one, and 90% of a new tech one that would be based out of Monte Vista. And so again, the staff would work seamlessly under Jim, and they'd all be trained and they'd all work in Monte, they all work in Alamosa. But that is the second item that is the new for this IGA. It's something we covered at your mini retreat. Based on the workload from both communities, we really did need to add another tech one, and this one would be based out of Monte Vista. And so that would provide a little bit better customer service and a face for them on a regular basis as well. So it would take the contract from $58,000 up to $95,745, and it would run through December 31st of 2024.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brooks. Councilor Daniel, followed by Councilor Carson.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
So thank you for this. It sounds as if the Monte Vista group knows about this increase. And then the other thing is it says that with a 5% cap on increases, but that could eventually, like, even if we don't raise our salaries more than 5%, it could be a more than a 5% increase in the contract based on the different cost of salaries. Are they okay with, like, is the cap a 5% total increase in the contract, or is a cap 5% increase on each of the salaries potentially?
So let me back up because I should have talked about the cap, but also I should have shared that Monte Vista did have their first reading for their annual budget, which does include this. And so they are fully aware of it. And they have their second reading tomorrow night. There hasn't been any hard questions about it or anything like that. So we do anticipate full approval. The interim city manager is fully in support of this, as is staff. And so, yes, they're very aware of it, and they'll have their part done before we have our part done. The 5% cap is the overall, but the overall is based on what the salaries and the benefits are, type of thing. So there's no other costs that are folded into the contract.
Right, but the total could still be more than 5%.
So it could be.
Okay, and that's okay. Like, so
Yeah.
that's the thing, like, just we're seeing a 5% cap versus like if it's a 5% cap on our increases or a 5% increase on the total contract.
On the contract. So we'll still have whatever happens with our benefits, and we'll still do whatever's going to be our raises, but what we can pass on to Monte is limited to 5%.
That was the part I was like, I just want to.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Daniel. Councilor Carson.
There's no more comments. I move that we approve ordinance 24-2021 on first reading and set for public hearing on December 1st, 2021 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussions? I would just like to thank Jim and his team for doing a magnificent job. It's so good to see the collaboration with Monte Vista and the city of Alamosa. And it just means a lot for a small rural valley like ours, showing us working together as a team. Keep up the great work. Okay, everybody, start voting. Ms.
And
Martinez.
Counselor Griego,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Okay. Thank you. That brings us now to committee reports. We have any committee reports? Councilor Hensley?
So I have two. I went to the marketing board last week, and the main thing out of that is motorway is going to come down probably the second week of December. And so that process is now at that stage. And so just reporting that that will happen. And so then moving on to the next parts of that. I also went to the Main Street Advisory Committee Board on Tuesday, and always so exciting to go to that. Such a positive and just so many things happening there. So one of the exciting things I think is going to be really good is there's going to be a restaurant week in March. And so the focus there of encouraging people to go to the restaurants. I don't know much detail about it, but I think it sounds really exciting. There's also lots of work right now with grants for different mural programs. So I think we're going to start seeing more murals in 2022. There's also different grants going on right now for parking. Parking's always been something we keep talking about. And so keep our fingers crossed. There may be one for JCPenney parking lot to pick up 30 or 40 spots. Friday Health is working on a grant. They're in the process of buying quite a bit of land over by the railroad. And then potentially the farmer's market would be there as well. So lots of great things there. And it sounds like there's our pedestrian lights, hopefully, fingers crossed, will be up by the end of the year. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilor Hensley. Okay, so I don't see any other mics lit on under committee reports, so we'll go ahead and move to staff announcements.
One question.
This question, okay, go ahead, Councilor Gray, go.
Yeah, you keep forgetting me. I'm out here still, Mayor.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
I had a question for Liz on the tearing down on the motorway. Have they contacted somebody who takes that material, or is that all that material going to landfill? Because there's a lot of that roof there it's only been there something like 10, 15 years. It's pretty good shape. Those windows probably been there maybe 5 years. I wonder if that's the case, or you just got the bid for taking it down.
So I'll need to double check, Charlie, and I will give you the information. I'm going from memory, but I do think the bid included them taking what they wanted.
Oh, good, good.
But I will confirm that with you just to be sure.
Thank you, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Gray, and Councilor Carson.
Is there gonna be like a party or a parade because of all the controversy over that building? I'm just kidding.
Well, I think there's always still going to be some mixed feelings, but at the same time, I try to look at the positive and that idea that it's going to be really exciting what that turns into. And the challenge with that building is obviously there's a lot of loyalty and a lot of great memories and things like that, but that building just has so many issues. And from a construction side of it, or however you say it, it's just not stable. And so it's really hard. So it got to a point there wasn't much choice. So it's not necessarily, obviously there's still from memories and things like that. It's not an easy decision, but I think it's the right decision. And I think things that'll happen moving forward will be really positive. Not that I know.
It just seems a little bittersweet. Like you say, there's a lot of mixed feelings.
I feel like it's been hanging on forever, this whole process. I'm kind of like,
It died hard, let's put it that way.
yeah, there will be definitely some road closure, I think, to do it. They need to make a little, so there is going to be, so in that sense, so I won't say there's fanfare, but you'll notice that it's happening.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. So thank you all. Thank you for your committee report, staff announcements.
So the chief and I are going to do a bit of a tag team on just one staff announcement. Myself, the chief, Captain Spangler, and his Corporal Kinshu.
Yes, ma'am.
Made the trip up to Evans last week to look at their co-responder program. We selected Evans because they're very similar to the structure that we want to use, because a lot of communities do it differently. What's similar to what we want to look at from implementing it here in Alamosa is They don't hire the mental health professional. The city doesn't. They contract with the private provider in the community who's an expert of hiring mental health professionals, which is what we've talked about doing. And they don't tie that mental health professional with just one officer. The professional can actually respond with different officers based on the type of call. And so that allows a much more efficient use of both the officer's time and the mental health professional. And so that's the structure we were very interested in. And that's how Evans has been running it. I'll give my city manager perspective, but I think you'll be much more interested in the chief's perspective. I was very interested. We were meeting with both the mental health professional, the law enforcement, the city manager, as well as the private provider, and figuring out how to make this work, how to make it sustainable, how it works for all the parties from a big picture perspective, I think was very informative, especially since we're using ARPA funding, which has a 2-year time frame. And so trying to think further down the road on how to sustain this, I think it was critical to have some of those discussions to know how to bring it back to here and have those discussions with our private providers. From a sustainability perspective, it was also really informative to me. We're going to go after grants, but this is clearly something where a lot of communities are waking up to it. So there's going to be a lot of competition for some very limited grants, to the point where Evans, there's actually 5 mental health professionals and they share them with the city of Greeley. So Evans has 2, Greeley has 2, and then there's a floater for those 2 communities. They get calls from other communities for that mental health professional to come help them sometimes. And those other communities are talking about coming together to try to create their own program, Windsor and some of those communities. And so it is something that once it's implemented, people are very much seeing positive results. I know when we first started talking about it, it was, is there going to be enough work? And I think where we're at now is we're going to need to make sure the position doesn't become overwhelmed type of situation. And so it was very informative from that perspective. But I think hearing the chief talk about the different types of calls and just how much of a difference this position might make will be really interesting. So Chief.
Thank you. So in regards to the trip we made last week, it was very beneficial. From my point of view, we did take 2 of the supervisors from our patrol division, which are going to be directly involved in the calls related to what we are calling the co-responder out on. It was interesting to hear the feedback from Evans PD, from the officers that actually go to these calls and contact the co-responders to respond and deal with this. The officers at first were pretty hesitant. There's a lot of pushback from what I was told, as there was for me when I was first told about this program. I've got to be progressive. I've got to understand some of this stuff before I just throw my hands up and say it's great. But I can tell you, listening to Chief Rick Brandt from Evans PD, who has 35 plus years law enforcement experience, it is very interesting to hear how beneficial it's been, not just for the police department when responding to these calls, but to the community they are protecting. So they're dealing with a variety of calls. Obviously, we kind of kept track of these mental health type calls for several months here in Alamosa, and we were realizing that our numbers are getting a little extreme. And what it's doing is tying up the officer's time. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're kind of trying to figure out how this is going to play in. Evans PD did really the same thing we did. It's a trial phase, and they were open to what's going on, and it's just helped out so much, and it's grown. They've grown with joining another agency such as Greeley PD, and dealing with these mental health crisis type calls. They're also dealing with juvenile calls, which are a very time-consuming issue as well. These officers can get tied up for hours and hours, which what we're doing is we have anywhere from 2 to, on a real good day where it's an overlap day for us, we could have 5 officers working the streets here in Alamosa. It gets tied up pretty quick though when we're dealing with arrest calls, mental health calls, and potentially a juvenile call where we're tied up for 2 to 4 hours. So that's where it's really coming into play. I did want to give you guys kind of an idea as far as what we've done. We haven't just been sitting back and waiting on this. We've actually been working kind of hard. We did get the office completed at the police department, so that's ready to go. We had to search around, kind of figure out what we're going to do for a vehicle for this employee once we eventually get that person on board. It's going to be one of the vehicles we were getting ready to retire that we've replaced. It's an older Chevy Tahoe. It will work great. They're going to be a secondary type responder. They're not going to be going to in-progress calls. So the safety concern will take care of all that as well. What am I missing?
I'm just going to give some details. It was amazing to sit back and have the police ask the questions, well, who does the pat down before you put the person in the car? I mean, so they were really talking through what's the role of the co-responder versus what's the police officer still doing and those types of things. And I think, you know, some of the questions also made clear the frustrations our law enforcement faces because we don't know the technical language sometimes of mental health. And we get bounced around to different groups. Is it adult protective services? Is it the crisis center? Is there a need for an M1 hold? Who does the M1 hold if someone's not willing to do it and trying to figure that out? And so that's not the expertise of our officers. And so being able to have someone who will better know and understand, no, this really is adult protective services that needs to step into this situation because of these indicators, or no, this is actually more where an M1 hold might be needed with a crisis center or those types of things. And so it's just dramatically going to improve our ability to navigate our current partners. And I think start to transform how we're interacting with our partners from a mental health perspective as well, and at least make it sound as if we know what we're talking about. So that I think will be very positive.
Yeah, no, that kind of sums it up. So these are professionals in that capacity, and they do understand what they're doing when it comes to that. Law enforcement has a very brief explanation on that, and when we're trying to expand that, it gets very difficult where I have to get our city attorney involved. It's going to be a helpful tool. It's just another tool that we're going to be using. And honestly, I see it growing in the near future. So we'll see how positive this is. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just prepare yourself. This is kind of the new way that things are working out. It is beneficial though. So y'all got questions for us?
Yes, we have a couple
Sure.
questions for you. We have Councilor Carson, then followed by Councilor Daniel. Go ahead, Councilor Carson.
I think that the fact that we're going here is it's awesome. It's great. I want to say that we're ahead of the game a little bit, but we're a little behind too. There's a lot of cities and communities that are doing this. I think Denver proper has 11 co-responders in the town. But I was able to sit in on a session with the Crowley County Sheriff's Office. They have a co-responder program out there, and they went through a lot of the similar struggles. And they had a pretty good response the first year. When you talk about the need for calls, the population out there is pretty scarce because it's Crowley County based in the middle, and they're going out to all these different municipalities because they're helping. But they had I want to say it was 254 calls. Was like the number. So with a population that's that scarce, I think we're on the right track because it's only going to increase. And I think it's something that's extremely needed right now. I really don't see us going. I mean, I see us probably in the future having more than one, probably 2, 3, because it's a huge need right now all over the valley. And if it's successful here, then, as things always play out, they may want to lean on us for some of that advice. So if you guys do get a chance, talk to the people in Crowley County. They were really informed. They've been doing it for a while. And I think they'll face some of the challenges that we do out here. But yeah, I think they were at 254 calls. So the need's more than there. And yeah, if you need something, we're willing to help for sure. So
No, I appreciate that. Do you mind if I comment just a little bit based on that?
Okay.
Looking at your call volume, what you're saying, 250 roughly. So when we were tracking our calls, we were looking roughly 4 a week where we'd utilize this. The thing that Heather mentioned in regards to the call volume, we're looking at 1 co-responder at this time. It's going to be my job to monitor that we're not overburdening this person, because I'm sure you can burn them out pretty quick. But the officers up in Greeley and and Evans are utilizing them for so many different things. We just have to narrow that down right now and kind of see what works best for our community and for that employee. So starting off with one, gets your foot in the door. After that, we got to kind of see where we're going though. So, but for a week, do the math on that, we're looking at quite a few calls we're going to be utilizing this individual on.
Yeah, and I think that was, I mean, the 254 calls was like Mahana, Masani, all those towns around there. So, and those towns are quite a bit smaller than us. So, or some of them are at least. I think we're on the right track. So keep up the momentum for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Daniel?
Thank you, Mayor. I am so excited. I think this has been something that I've been really looking forward and happy that you've explored because I do know that it's a challenge. What I appreciate is that we need to have a focus for the first year, but recognizing that the services these type of staff can provide can help you with all sorts of things to save your officers time so they can be doing other public safety kinds of things. And I think that that's the piece where not jumping ahead, not rushing our fences or anything like that, but knowing that there's potential to see it in a very different way, even without going on call, like being in the car with you, which I do think is a good, I think your solution is good, Chief, and I appreciate that. I'm very excited about using these professionals. And when you said, your officers don't get that training with this person on your team, they're going to learn more. The mental health professional is going to learn more about law enforcement things, and you're going to learn more about mental health stuff. And it's just going to be a back and forth kind of process. And I'm super excited about having that kind of knowledge in our team as a whole and having that team expand to include different types of services that we can offer. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Daniel. And Councilor Grego, I haven't forgotten about you. I see you. Okay, you're next.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I was one of the counselors that was pretty concerned about not so much the program. I think the program's a good program, but the funding. And right now we have a group that does mental health in our community, and we're talking about grants and stuff. I think we should have some kind of line of communication with Mr. Fernando and those guys down there to see if maybe when they apply for their monies, that they could probably apply for some kind of funding to help us over here, help not only the city of Alamosa, other parts of the valley that want to do some kind of program like this. I think it's a good program, and Councilor Daniels, your comments are well taken, but it's something that it's going to take, like the chief says, we're just breaking into it. Pretty soon it's going to start getting a little tougher, and these people need to step up. I know that I've been one to question that group out there, and they're just building houses and houses, and I think the money should be coming to help the community and help the people that have mental problems. So that's the only comment I have. Thank you.
And Councilor Grego, to that point, when we issue our request for proposal, I do want to include some language to where, as we evaluate the successful partner, is their willingness to work with us on developing a sustainability plan. And so I definitely want to make sure those discussions are happening right up front with whoever we decide to partner with.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and wrap this up too on this part. I'm so happy that you all went on that road trip, and I'm glad to see that you were able to participate and hear it from the other law enforcement officers as well. But what I'm really proud of is not only our city staff, but also our police chief and your open-mindedness to where you're open to finding ways to adjust and adapt to situations that we face now. A lot of people are still going around with blinders on and closed-minded. It just says a lot about our team here. So I'm really glad to hear that. And one thing I heard you say earlier, Chief, and I liked it, you said this would be another helpful tool, a helpful tool. And as a council, that's what we want to make sure that we equip our police chief with the tools that he needs and his officers need to be successful. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay. Is that the only one?
That's the only thing for
You're
staff.
kidding me. Goodness, that's great. All right. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on down to Next item on the agenda, the local liquor licensing action, needs and desires hearing for new application for a hotel/restaurant license, the Friars Fork, Inc., DBA. Who's taking this? Mr. Sweet.
Typically, Mayor, you would turn that over to me to conduct the hearing on the needs and desires.
Okay.
So I'm happy to do that.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you. sir.
All right, very good. The way that we have found that this works most efficiently is the applicant will come and make a presentation to council. Council can then ask questions if they have any of the applicant after that presentation. And once that process is done, we'll open the hearing up for anybody who wants to comment on the application. And typically I like to open it up to people who want to comment in favor first. And then anybody, once those people are done, anybody, including people on Zoom, anybody who wants to comment against it. And then it would be turned back to council for deliberation. And as you know, if the matter appears pretty clear cut, you can make a decision tonight. It won't become formal until you adopt written findings, which you would instruct me to prepare for your next meeting. So before we get into that, let me just confirm with the clerk that the property, the notice was posted on the property on October 8th, 2021 and published in the Valley Courier on November 6th of 2021. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant to discuss with council their application.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm nervous. Okay, so gentlemen, ladies of the council, my business partner who happens to be my husband, and I would like to begin by thanking you for your time and consideration in hearing our plea to establish a liquor license for our new venture, which is going to be the Friars Fork and the Sanctuary. I'm just going to read this because my name is Denise Vigil, and I'm one of the owners and operator of a project that will be the culmination of the entirety of my working life and experiences. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a native to Alamosa. I was raised in Alamosa. I graduated from Alamosa High School and I attended ASU before being groomed into the food and beverage industry, which led me to New York and the world-renowned CIA, which I graduated in 1997. For decades, I was able to travel and work in some of the top kitchens with some of the chefs that you probably watch on television. Later, I stepped out of the kitchen and was a store manager for Starbucks Coffee Company and 7 of its stores between Denver and Pueblo. I went back to the kitchen and all things restaurant and remained there for the past decade. All of this to say that I have about 28 years of experience in this industry. And after being able to live around the country in some beautiful cities, I find myself home in Alamosa and super proud to be here. So there's that. About the Friars Fork. So the Friars Fork is the former St. Thomas Episcopal Church on 4th Street. Currently it is being remodeled. We are pretty determined to keep the integrity and the history of the structure. It's very important to us. We've even gone as far as to start some of the remodeling and construction of the interior to bring back the interior architecture that the church had previously covered up. I think probably just out of cost, but we feel like it's an important thing to be able to open up those windows in the facade, for the town. The former parish hall will become an Italian Mediterranean restaurant. The former sanctuary will become a sophisticated and smart tavern, or a speakeasy, I guess, of sorts. Thus, those are both reasons why we're here making our plea for this liquor license. We're here to establish a need. So the history of that is, so once the seed was planted, that I could establish myself back home, I spent a lot of time mulling and pondering exactly what would be a good fit, what our town already has, what it could use, and what I could bring to the table. Pun intended. I asked friends, I asked family and associates, and I listened. And I heard that Alamosa needs a restaurant that is wholly different from anything we already have. This Mediterranean Italian restaurant, the Friars Fork, will fit this slot perfectly. It will primarily serve Italian fare, but it will still be open to Spanish, like tapas on Tuesdays maybe, and some Greek influences. We will need the ability, obviously, to serve wine, beer, and cocktails. The sanctuary, the Speakeasy, is in need also based on filling a particular niche. This much smaller building is separate, but yet attached to the restaurant. Its function is to serve adult beverages that are for the most part unavailable anywhere else in Alamosa and likely in the valley. Our intention is to be a place that is classy, that is unique, and that is low key. A place where professionals may conduct business, a place where guests can enjoy maybe a charcuterie plate while listening to some Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, stuff like that. A place to sip a fine scotch, maybe martini, nice glass of Pinot Noir. We plan also to serve only beer from the San Luis Valley. We plan to partner with as many local suppliers as possible so we can help each other out. I think that's really important. Since the purchase of this property, I've been approached both in person and virtually, and by no fewer than 100 city folks, all enthusiastic in support of our dream. I've been approached by attorneys, physicians, a judge, and a plethora of local business owners who are keen on a place to host their clientele, their colleagues, as well as families. I've been approached by college professors who are excited to partake in an environment that is a little different from maybe what their students might typically are apt to enjoy, right? During the summer, the courtyard, which spans both buildings, will be really quite a lovely place to enjoy both food and beverage. It's one block off Main Street. It's a wonderful location. And with this, we intend to give our town another lovely jewel to shine and to be proud of. But obviously, we need your support in order for any of this to come to fruition. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me ask you a couple questions before we turn it over to council, just so that we have some things in the record. Do you have the copy of the posting, the notice that was posted? Okay, so if you'll bring that over to the clerk, we'll mark that as Exhibit A.
Totally.
And that was posted on October, what was it, 6th or something? 8th?
I believe, yes.
Okay. And do you have anything else, any other exhibits that we need to take care of at this point?
It's just a little visual of where we're at. I also have the petitions.
That's what I was angling for.
We have that too. Should I want that?
So if you want to, we can mark this visual as Exhibit B. And we just need to make sure that the clerk has a copy. And then if you have petitions, how many signatures are on those petitions roughly?
There's over, I'm going to say 120, 130 possibly. I didn't count. I've got
Okay.
pages.
Okay, very good. So if you would hand those to Councilor Hensley, she can pass them on down through council and they'll end up with the clerk and we'll call that Exhibit C. And with that, council, if you have any questions for the applicant before we move into comments from the audience, this would be the time.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll start here with the council members here first, and we'll go with Councilor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate a lot and the thought you put into sharing that with us and obviously the love you have for Alamosa. So thank you. I am wondering about the training you will give to your servers regarding beverage, alcohol sales, and how you will monitor underage service and things like that.
Right. We plan to, having a liquor license is a very serious endeavor to have. So we have twofold. So I myself, just through my my history. I'm certified as a trainer, but also there are two other venues that we were looking at. We haven't decided on one. One is called, it's called 360. It's a 360 training. And there's also the more popular one that's TIPS in Colorado. So we are looking at both of those. We haven't yet obviously begun any of our hiring process, but both of those are definitely going to be in place because we need to make sure that that we are very protective of our liquor license, that we're very responsible for that. And we'll move forward in that fashion.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it was Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Carson.
So I actually, sorry, Councilor Daniel asked the question I was going to ask, but I would say overall, I mean, you gave a great presentation. You have the signatures. I think this sounds like something very unique and different, which is very exciting. I will say it's 1 block from my house. So, so I'm really excited about it. But I think like previous alcohol, you know, again, not necessarily to be abused, but at the same time, when you're having a meal, things like that, if done appropriately is definitely a perfect partnership. I'm from the restaurant business myself, not necessarily quite as the trainings you've had, but at the same time, it's necessary for it to be profitable and for people to come in. So with that, it sounds like you've really put things together. And I'm just really excited about the idea that you've kept that integrity of the building. I mean, even all the way to the name of what your business is. So I think it's very exciting and I think it's going to be a great addition to our community.
Thank you.
So Councilor Hensley's tipping her hand. Let me just remind council, this is a good time for questions and then you'll have a discussion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilor Carson.
I just wanted to ask how the interaction went with the neighbors when you guys were pitching the idea.
Oh, it was glorious. We had, there's the building directly next to the sanctuary. There are a couple of rentals. One lady, I can't recall her name, but she came down to just before we even closed on the property, and she was a little frantic, and she just, is this your property? Is this your, we said, well, we're in the process. And she just almost started crying. She just was so glad. She said there's been a little bit of a homeless problem in that property for a while, that she has had to, she bought a dog for some protection because she was a little bit concerned about that area. We told her what we were planning and she was actually thrilled. Outside of that, I have got just through the slot of the door, several cards from neighbors on State Street. And on one of them used to be a knife sharpening business, since retired, but is willing to come out of retirement just to service our product. I've got neighbors who are offering used office furniture for our venture. We've got people who are wanting to come and maybe help with some of the demolition, although we can't do that for, legally, but so we've gotten a really beautiful outreach from just our little neighborhood from that. And then outside of that, like I said, just, through email and social media, I have messages from people I don't even know who are very excited about this proposition, that it's something that's a little different. It's going to be, I think, just a beautiful building and a beautiful place, and just very, soft-spoken and beautiful, and a place where business can be had, where, adults can enjoy without televisions and neon, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just this is going to be a different spot altogether.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Brawls, then Councilor Vigil, then Councilor Griego.
Is this a new liquor license? It's brand new, right?
It is.
How many liquor licenses within like a 2-block area there? Can you answer that?
2 blocks would get you down to Main Street, so quite a few, probably 5 or 6.
Now,
As you go along Main Street.
My concern is the density of, to get liquor, do you have to have a meal, or can you walk in and just get a beer or a cocktail?
You do not have to have a meal. The law says our sales need to be 25% of our revenue. Gross revenue needs to be within food sales. So we don't need to, you can go to the Speakeasy if you want, just the Speakeasy. You can go there and have, a scotch before dinner and wait there, or be in the courtyard. You can go back and forth between both, or you can just forego that, go to the restaurant and not have any alcoholic beverages, just iced tea, but it is open.
Are you gonna serve hard liquor? I mean,
Yes, sir.
so you can go there and drink and basically almost be like a bar. Is that, you're not gonna have a bar setting, right?
It is.
Is a bar setting?
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Council Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. When do you plan on opening?
We don't know. We're really, the construction piece of it is what's going to take a piece of it. We've ordered new windows, but they're custom because of again, the architectural integrity. So we are 3 months out for that. And then there's a backlog. There's a backlog with materials. There's a backlog with everything. So probably not until the beginning of 2022.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Councilor Carson, then Councilor Grego.
I have one comment, besides my other comments. I just want to commend you guys on being proactive because, you're ahead of the game and you're prepping for what's coming. So I just want to, sometimes we get some processes that are they seem a little bit rushed, and this one doesn't. So just thank you for being proactive and for coming to us with plenty of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Grego.
Thank
You're
you,
up.
Mayor. I had a question and a comment. Ms. Vigil, what days and times are you gonna be open?
We're going to be closed Mondays, possibly Tuesdays, but Mondays for sure. And we will be open 11 until probably 9 p.m. As far as the restaurant goes. The sanctuary will probably be open, but that'll be on a business need basis and also a seasonal basis. So we'll fluctuate that. However, we don't plan on being the kind of establishment that has closing, at 2 a.m. We'll probably cut it off a lot earlier than that.
In a comment on the type of license, it's a hotel restaurant license for Mr. Broyles' comments and it's something that we try to help our restaurant people make it. And with Italian food, people enjoy a glass of wine. I'm not an Italiano, but stuff like that, it goes hand in hand. And what you described is not going to be a bar situation where a lot of young people are going to go out there and just sit in the bar and get drunk and start yelling and stuff. So I really appreciate your presentation, and I think whatever we can do to help out a business survive, I think we should be there to help them out. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Grego. Mr. Suizo.
All right, so now we're going to open it up to the public. If you guys want to go ahead and have a seat, you'll be back up there again, I'm sure. But anybody from the audience who wishes to comment in favor of the issuance of this license, please proceed to a microphone. And if you would, please state your name and your address before beginning your comments.
Sure. My name is Rena Reyes. I live at 2317 Briarwood Drive. I just want to come up here and briefly share my support for this wonderful idea that Denise and Nelson have come up with. I think the term just a bar was thrown around earlier, but myself, I'm a young business professional in town. And I feel like this is something that myself and my colleagues would greatly benefit from. I feel like we lack a great deal of variety in this town, and oftentimes it's difficult to kind of choose different places to visit because of that. So I just want to say that I think Denise's vision is very beautiful, and I would feel comfortable going with my colleagues to this establishment, as well as my friends and my family. So I wouldn't just label it just a bar. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Tom Gilmore, and I've known Denise for many years. I have the highest respect for both her management and culinary skills. And I think as far as the issue before you tonight, you can be assured that it will be managed to the highest standards that you expect of this kind of an establishment. And further, I think it will be a real creative, new, and excellent addition to the community. I think it'll fill a niche that it will be make the community a more interesting and exciting place. And so I encourage you to support the creation of this kind of unique new business for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Chuck Kelly. I own Eclipse Property Management, Altitude Appliances, and the Cavaliers Office Building. And I don't know these folks at all. I've never heard about this. I obviously came here for something else tonight. And sitting in the office, I heard this idea, and I have to tell you that I stand in my conference room every day at the Cavaliers Building, and I look right at this building. And I have brainstormed with many local business people about what we could do with this building as a community. My wife suggested turning it into a restaurant. And I am just so excited and happy to hear someone doing this. And I commend you, because opening a business now during COVID, or whatever you would want to call this time, is so difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, because I just went through this with the appliance store. It takes guts. And it takes determination. And I'm super excited just to see another business come to downtown, because I feel like, as someone who owns 2 buildings in downtown, I want to see downtown to continue to prosper. And I look back to where it was 10 years ago, and it's like, we were all wondering, what's Alamosa going to look like in 10 years? Is it even going to be here? And look where we are now. And I'm so happy to see 4th Street now start to get some new businesses. That's exciting to me. And so I think this is great. I also love to grab my laptop and hop all over downtown and just work from anywhere. I won't tell you all the places I go, but I'm really excited to add another one to my list, because it's literally right across my parking lot. So I'm really excited. I don't know you folks, but thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and staff. First of all, I just want to say that I'm very proud of Denise and her husband, Nelson, for being able to do this. My daughter has worked in the finest restaurants and gone to one of the finest culinary schools in the nation. She has worked up in Aspen, up in Portland, Utah, Orem, Utah, Sundance, lots of other places, not to mention that she ran the Trinchera Ranch food service there. So she has a big vision, a vision that I think that is good for the town of Alamosa. I think it's a visionary thing that she's trying to put together here. So I'm very proud of her, and I'm her father. So I used to go to New York all the time to visit with her at the culinary school. So I hope that you look favorably upon this application, and hope that you can say it's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else present in the room who wants to speak in favor? Doesn't look like it. Let's see if there's anybody on Zoom who wants to speak in favor of the application. And I guess that I would say they've been on long enough, they know how to raise their hands, and I don't see any hands raised. So let's turn to anybody who wishes to speak in opposition to the application here in the room. Nobody is wishing to speak in opposition. Is there anybody on Zoom who is wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Raise your hand. And nobody on Zoom wishes to speak in opposition either. So at this point, I will close the public hearing and I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, for council to discuss. If they have any further questions of the applicant, they can certainly ask them, or you can certainly ask them, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you so very much for that. Okay, I'll start off with Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Denise and Nelson for coming up tonight. Really excited about this. The biggest thing I'm excited about is as Ms. Hensley said earlier, you're keeping the integrity of the building. I'm on the liaison to the HPAC, the Historical Preservation, and having that intact is awesome, and I think it's good. I like that we're expanding into 4th Street, like Mr. Kelly said, and we have a great we have a great bar scene in Alamosa. We have a brewery scene in Alamosa. This is something different, and I think it's going to attract a different clientele, and I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vihil. Councilor Daniel, then Councilor Brawls.
Thank you, Mayor. Since I've been on council, I do think that our liquor outlet density needs to be continually looked at, but I think businesses like this, doing this kind of work with this kind of mission is different than just adding a liquor store. And so I do think that we are a small community and we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at our DUIs and we're looking at the things that happen when alcohol is present. And I believe this type of establishment, A, the way they've set it up will only work if there's alcohol, but B, that this is something new and unique to Alamosa that I think will allow responsible adult people to go have a very relaxed drink in a reasonable manner. And so I absolutely support this and understand the concern about liquor outlet density. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Daniel. We're going to go to Councilor Brawls, and then we're going to go to Councilor Griego.
I want to say I appreciate, I'm for economic development. And I think the use of this building is great. I like your concept. And I think having the Italian Mediterranean style restaurants is needed in Alamosa. And so I applaud you on that. I just worry about our youth in Alamosa and the number of liquor establishments and the accessibility to liquor. The good thing is it's not a liquor store. I appreciate that. And I think if you had managed it, the liquor, so that people don't get insanely drunk, manage the quantity per person, I think that would add to the ambience of your restaurant. And so my worry is the density and the youth, students going there and overindulging. And so that would be my concern. But I appreciate your efforts. I think it's an outstanding plan, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Councilor Brawls. Councilor Griego.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm born and raised here in Alamosa, and I remember when that was a beautiful, beautiful church, the rock, all the rock, the beautiful rock, and how they maintained it. And here lately, I've seen, one day I went by and I saw a bunch of kids running in and out. I don't know what it turned into, and I had told my wife, that can't be a church anymore. So it would disturb me to see such a beautiful church being turned into, I guess, a free for all, whatever they wanted to do in there. And it's so important to take something like that that's been empty and take it away from people that are just trying to destroy it. For you to say that you're going to bring it back the way pretty much closely what it was, it's going to be amazing, and I just can't thank you guys enough for believing in our community and believing in our economic development plan, because that's our plan, is to make sure that all our buildings downtown are occupied and something is going. And with that, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and approve the liquor, a hotel restaurant license for Friars Fork Inc., DAB, the Friar Fork, 607 4th Street.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second.
I think implicit in that motion is directing your attorney to come back to you at your next meeting with proposed written findings approving the license.
Correct. And one more question, Eric, is they can go ahead and start preparing, you said until you get the final sayings, then they can move forward. In a time like this, the more you can put together in a business and get it ready to open it up, the better. And as Mr. Kelly says, during COVID, it's been tough. So the faster you can put something together, I think it'd be better for the people. So would they be able to go ahead and after this, if this motion passes, to proceed with putting together their alcohol and all this?
Well,
Or
they can
apply to the state too, I guess.
They can certainly rely on the fact that you're going to approve the license. And, as Councilor Carson elicited, they're not going to be serving anything for a while. And so I'm sure the license will actually issue prior to them needing it. So I think that their timing is refreshingly in advance.
And Charlie, they applied as a concurrent license, so the application's already up at the state.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, and I didn't get a chance to make a comment, so I'll do it. So I'll do so right now. Denise and Nelson, that was a very good presentation. I'm just always so proud when I hear stories like yours, where people who left when they were younger and went out abroad and saw the country and the world and then decided to come back to our community, especially people like you who've been exposed to so many wonderful places. It really says a lot, and I wish you all much success in your business venture. Okay, we have a motion, second, no further discussion. Let's start voting.
And Counselor Griego,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to the, well, next item is going to be council comments. Do we have any council comments before we go to the executive session? Okay.
Mayor and council and staff, I just want to say thank you. It's been great serving on city council. And I thank the voters in Ward 2 for allowing me to serve and represent them. And so it's been great, and I appreciate everybody's contribution. We have discussed a lot of ideas, and we've grown from them, and the city's better off for it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilor Brawls. I see we're gonna have some mics lit up for a little while here, so I'll start with Councilor Inslee. We'll go all the way down to Councilor Carson. We'll bring it to Councilor Griego, and then I'll wrap things up. Okay.
I just want to say, Council Broyles, it's been great to have you for the last 4 years. I know you're going to have some fun and exciting things. I want you to really enjoy being with your family. I know that's one of the things you're really looking forward to. And you can report back and tell us how many golf courses you see in the next year, since you said you saw 16 this year. So, but definitely, I wish you the best.
Mr. Broyles, wanted to just quick acknowledge you and your service for the last 4 years. For all the counselors that I've served on before who've left or, are done serving, I always try to pick up something that I can learn from them. And the biggest thing I learned from you is how detailed you were on the budgets and where money's being spent and coming in and out. And I'm going to use that for the rest of my time here. So thank you, sir.
And Councilor Broyles, I just wanted to say thank you for all of your work, and I really appreciate you and your integrity. I think you say what you think, and I think you believe it in things, and you stand up for what you believe in, and I really, really appreciate that. And I enjoyed is probably a strong word, enjoyed our competition in Ward 2, and also appreciated, even after I lost, you were the first one on council to say you thought I deserved a chance to be back. And I won't ever forget that. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you. So thank you.
Okay, Councilor Carson.
David, I've appreciated working with you, and I will continue to reach out to you for advice. We'll have a little shadow government type stuff going on. Thank you, David. I appreciate you. And I will call you for lunch. We'll keep the chats up. And I think you've been pretty effective. And, you know, this council's been extremely effective. I personally believe that. And I know a lot of people do. And even the people that complain about it know we have been. So thank you. Appreciate it. And Godspeed on all your good trips and your fun stuff you get to do.
That's sweet.
Thank you, Council Carson. Council Griego?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry for not being there tonight. I got that booster, Johnson & Johnson booster shot, and it kind of tore up my stomach. So I didn't want to keep leaving the council chambers back and forth. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm still mad at David, you know, and what he brought to this council, I think he taught a lot of us a lot of things. And I can remember when he first come on, you know, I said, like I analyze all council people, and I've been here just a little bit of time. And I see what he brought and how he presented stuff and how he made sense a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna miss that. And he's always been a big, strong supporter of the city of Alamosa and economic development. So I'm sure that he'll continue doing that. So David, thank you so much for what you have given to this community. And hopefully your golf game gets a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll wrap it up. Council Brawls, I want to thank you for your service here on council, and I wish you the best in all of your future endeavors. Thank you.
I just want to add that, you know, the mayor taught us that there's no I in team. So thank you.
You're welcome, my friend. Thank you. Okay, so, well, we're gonna move over to executive session. And we're gonna do a motion. Anybody want to start that?
Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes 24-6, 4024A and 4C to discuss funding mechanisms and options for pursuing a conservation easement on the city ranch.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, let's start voting. Ms. Martinez?
And Counselor Griego?
Yes.
The motion carried unanimously.
Not sure. Okay, so I'm sorry, did you say it passed?
Yes, it carried unanimously.
Okay, good. So are we gonna meet here or are we gonna meet and we're gonna meet over there? Okay, so how about we allow council to take at least a 5-minute break? How about we do this? Come back at 9:35. How about that for everybody? Gives enough time, okay? And no further business would be discussed. Did I get that right?